Everyone, welcome to our bi-weekly Hangout on Air series. Today is 11/11 and we are live at 11. That's pretty cool. And apparently it's also a blue themed day. So all of us wearing blue here for Google Tag Manager Blue. And today we are going to talk about Google Tag Manager, new features, best practices, and a very special guest is going to be showing some use cases for mobile GTM. So today I'm joined by Lukas Bergstrom, Product Manager for GTM, Scott Herman, Product Manager for GTM, and Caitlin Marvin, who is a data analyst from Progressive and will be doing our special guest appearance talking about mobile GTM. And as always, I'm Krista Seiden, Analytics Advocate for Google. So before we start, our normal reminder here, submit your questions. You can do that in two ways. So there's the Hangout on Air chat box. That's in the window that you're looking at. There's a little chat box. Go ahead and submit your questions as we go along. If anything comes up, we'll make sure to answer them at the end. Or if you'd rather, there's a form link. It's there. It's also in the event invite. So go ahead and submit those questions throughout the show, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. All right, so let's take a look at the agenda. Today we're going to talk about tag sequencing, code mirror, new tag templates, and give you an example of the Google Consumer Survey tag template, and also folders. We're going to do all that before we then hand it over to Caitlin and go through mobile GTM for mobile apps. And then, as always, we'll end with Q&A. So we're going to be going back and forth between slides and a demo and just having a really good conversation about GTM. So I guess with that, let's do it. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Krista.
Yeah, great to be here.
Right.
So as Krista mentioned, we have a variety of recent features that we'd like to share with you today. The first one is tag sequencing, and this is the ability to specify tags to fire immediately before and or after a given tag. So this is very useful if you need one tag to load or set some information before another tag fires, for example, a library of some sort. So Lukas is going to be giving us a demo of all of this functionality in a few moments. The next feature that we want to talk through is code mirror. So with this change to Google Tag Manager, it's now much easier to work with code. This includes syntax highlighting, the ability to pop out the window to have a nicer editing experience, for example, with that arrow in the bottom right. And really just viewing and editing your code in Google Tag Manager should be a lot easier to do now.
It's much more like you would expect to edit code in any other program, right?
Exactly right.
Right.
Great.
So, yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes the amount of code that you're editing in a custom HTML tag or a custom JavaScript variable can grow. And if you're spending a lot of time in there, it's really nice to be able to easily navigate and see what you're working with.
Right.
Definitely. Cool.
All right. And we also have a variety of new tag templates in Google Tag Manager. One of the ones we want to highlight today is the Google Consumer Surveys tag. Some third-party tags as well, for example, Crazy Egg tag. We also want to highlight our program for vendors to submit tag templates. You can see the link on the slide here.
Yep. So you want to tell us really quickly just a little more about that program?
Sure. So, basically, we're committed to making sure that GTM does more and more stuff really easily out of the box. Right. So obviously you can use custom HTML tags to deploy whatever tags you want, but it's not the ideal experience. Security-wise, it's better to use kind of built-in tag templates. So we want to make sure that we're committed to GTM being a vendor-neutral product that just does a ton for you. And so rather than sort of have a program where we need to implement every template one by one and have a Google engineer working on that, it's going to scale a lot better if vendors can actually create their own tag templates, submit them to us. If they have updates to the tags, it might be much easier for them to make those updates and send them to us. So we've created a program where people can sign up, create their own tag templates, and once they're approved, have them show up in Tag Manager.
Right.
And we're kind of just getting started with this program, but we're really excited over the next year to roll out a lot more tag templates.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a tag vendor, if you have a tag that your company produces, or you work with vendors that you'd like to see add tags to Google Tag Manager, feel free to go to this link, g.co/tagmanagervendors.
Cool.
All right.
And I think there's one more thing, right?
So we also want to talk about folders, which is a recent addition to Google Tag Manager. We're going to be going through that a bit, and Lukas is going to jump into a demo and show us this functionality in action.
Yeah, sounds good. So what we heard from a lot of people who have been working in Tag Manager for a long time is that, they're doing more and more inside of Tag Manager, and that inevitably means they've got kind of more and more stuff to deal with. And eventually that stuff becomes kind of a burden, to navigate, right? Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to give people tools to, organize all the stuff that they're working with in a kind of logical way. But something people have heard is, they're not quite sure what the best practices are for how to use folders. So I wanted to show you how we use folders on a demo site that we use a lot, which is actually a public-facing website, the Google Merchandise Store. So if we can actually switch over to the demo computer that's sitting in front of me, I'll walk you through this. So yeah, so you're looking at the Google Merchandise Store, where you can buy Google swag of all different kinds. And so we're actually running Google Tag Manager on this site, believe it or not. So let's go in and see kind of how many tags they're using on the Google Merchandise Store. And as you can see by how long that page took to load, they're using quite a bit, right? So they're doing things like, measuring conversions from ad campaigns running on DoubleClick, Google Analytics, doing some AdWords remarketing, right? Universal Analytics. So just, pretty nice number of tags here, pretty rich container. And, this is obviously not the ideal experience. We give you some tools to kind of navigate. So right now it's sorted by name. I can also sort by, type of tag or by, when it was last edited. But, this is, sort of not the ideal experience for navigating all the time. So instead, what they've done on the Google Merchandise Store site is they're using folders. And the way that they're using folders, let me close this one. So the way they're using folders is that they've actually got them organized based on kind of, how like tags that they're going to be editing together at the same time. So for example, the Google Merchandise Store is used to demo Google Analytics Premium to people, right? So they've got a set of tags, triggers, and variables that they all use together as part of that demo. And they're all grouped together in this folder, right? And so if they need to edit them, they can see all of them at the same time and make sure that they're looking at the right set of stuff.
So it makes it really easy to find the tags, triggers, variables that you're looking for at a high level, rather than having to search through a whole long list of those individual tags, triggers, and variables, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It just keeps kind of, groups of stuff together in a logical way so you can work with it.
Besides the Google Merchandise Store, have you guys seen any other cool use cases of folders? Maybe Scott, have you come across anything that you really wanted to call out as something cool, or maybe that other people should consider when they're organizing these?
Yeah, certainly. So in the past, a lot of people had used naming conventions for sorting their tags and keeping them in an order. One thing I would say, as people have tried this out and started using folders, I wouldn't abandon those naming tag conventions in place and use folders in place. I would continue whatever naming conventions you have. It just helps for that more granular organization and functionality.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've talked a lot about naming conventions, and we have an article in the solutions guide on best practices there. So if it's a GA tag, starting it with GA and then whatever that tag is for, page view or whatnot. Naming conventions are incredibly important, regardless of how many tags, triggers, or variables you have and how they're organized in folders.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's move on.
Cool. So I think the next thing we wanted to look at is just an example of one of the new tag templates we added to Tag Manager. And I'm going to walk through the Google Consumer Surveys tag. Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting just because, most of the tags that you're rolling out through GTM are going to be tracking tags, totally invisible to the user. Yep. This is a pretty neat example of how you can use Tag Manager to roll out something really different, right? So in this case, let's say that I'm using Google Consumer Surveys. And I've decided I'm going to go create a new survey that I want to run on my site. And particularly, I'm interested in, what additional Google swag do you want to be available through the Google Merchandise Store, right? Keychains and sweatshirts maybe aren't enough. So, let's see what else we can add to this list.
I want like a super shiny water bottle.
Okay, we can make that an option. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the survey, and then I'm going to say that the audience is my website, right? And just for this example, I'm just going to pick an example website, but you create a website in Google Consumer Surveys that pretty much maps one-to-one to a GTM container, right? And then I'm going to click continue. It's going to give me, a lot of different options for different kinds of surveys that I can run, right? So I could, run a survey that, presents side-by-side images. Would you prefer to buy this product or that product? Or a rating scale, how happy are you with your experience on the website today? Or even free text. But today, we're just going to ask them one question, right? And that's going to be a multiple choice question. What new Google merch would you like to see? And our first potential answer is going to be a shiny Google water bottle.
Yes.
I would rather see a Google beer cozy. Scott, do you have something you've been wanting to buy for a while?
How about some YouTube socks?
Some YouTube socks.
Yeah, we might already have that, but
a nice YouTube red for the holidays coming up. I've set this to randomize the answer order, and I'm not going to include an open-ended text field today, but I could. So I'm going to confirm, and I'm going to say, today I just want, 5 responses. I'm going to buy now, right? And I'm actually not going to go through with this transaction, but I'll show you. Basically, let's say that I clicked the buy now button, right? So what are my next steps to actually get this new survey running on my site? So it was on this website, my website, and I've got this kind of set up to under advanced settings, publishing state is enabled. I can also set it to testing if I want to test out the survey before I run it. Google Consumer Surveys has its own settings for kind of making sure that you don't show surveys to people too many times. So I'm going to make sure that, I'm going to, set those. So make sure that sort of 200 minutes between surveys. And, I'm going to activate the survey. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this site ID that's in this code snippet here, because this is what Tag Manager needs in order to run the survey. All right, and I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to go to Tag Manager, and I'm going to create a new tag for that survey. Call it new merch survey. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to call this just Google Consumer Surveys. And the reason for that is because Google Consumer Surveys has its own controls for what surveys it's running and when it's showing them. You're not actually going to create a different tag on your site for every survey, because that's just not how the tag works. So that part's controlled in Google Consumer Surveys. What I'm going to use GTM for is just to decide where I want to show surveys, right? What pages I might show a survey on, right? And
that's that site ID that you took from Google Consumer Surveys.
Yeah.
And so basically, once that's in the tag and that tag is running on your site, if you have a survey launched through GCS that is live, it's going to find that code running through GTM. And so if you change out the survey or launch a new one with that same website ID in Google Consumer Surveys, it'll then have a new survey that's running on your site through the same ID.
Yep, exactly.
Very cool.
Yep, and so I'm just going to say fire this on all pages. I've got the survey set up here And I'm going to say, I only want to show it to them after they've looked at 3 pages so that I don't, kind of ask people that aren't really engaged, right? And then I create the tag. I can obviously preview it, if I've got testing mode set up on the survey here. And then when everything's ready, I click, published in Google Consumer Surveys, publish on GTM, and my survey's live.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that this is a super cool tag. I know I was a huge proponent of this being built. I remember having to put the GCS tag in like a custom HTML tag or something like that prior to us actually having a template for it. So I think this is a huge step forward and really great for marketers to easily be able to launch surveys on their websites. And now we just make that process that much easier now.
Yep. Cool.
Cool. All right. What else do you want to demo? CodeMirror? Want to show them that really quickly?
So let's say,
could we show what that tag would look like if you had to paste it into a custom HTML?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, the other way I can do this, which works, but is just kind of, A, it's not as secure. B, your IT team might have actually, blacklisted custom HTML, so you can't use it at all. Yeah. But the other thing that I could have done is taken that snippet from Google Consumer Surveys and created a new tag of type custom HTML to deploy it.
Yeah, having it in the tag template also makes it a lot easier to use our built-in functionality like macros. So for example, if you have something like a lookup table macro for multiple different site IDs with a container spread across those sites, you can account for that much more easily with this template and a macro than with the custom HTML that Lukas is showing us now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I actually kind of didn't follow best practices just then by typing the site ID in directly. It's nicer if I create a variable for site ID, right, and use that here. And obviously, it's going to be easier for me if I, have a nice field that I can paste that into rather than needing to edit this directly. This is not a particularly complicated example, but even this is a little bit error prone, right? If I get, if I delete one extra character, I'm in a little bit of trouble, right?
Yep. Well, so I mean, even now, as you're building this out, I think this is a great time to mention CodeMirror, right? Because I think you're using the custom HTML editor there.
Right. So if I have to use custom HTML, I at least want to, have the maximum chance that I'm not going to mess it up, which is highly likely for me. But in this case, so it just does nice stuff like syntax highlighting, right? So I can see that, if I delete this quote mark here, the whole end of this tag is red, right? It's interpreting, this end script tag as actually part of the source attribute, which is not exactly what I want. So if I type that in, everything's working fine. And it's just nicer to kind of have this kind of more full screen view.
Certainly. You'll also notice that as you enter more lines, the tabbing will be handled for you automatically. We also include line numbers there, which makes it really a lot easier to debug and figure out what's going on. Yep. And if you have custom functions that you're using, for example, in custom JavaScript variables, you can very easily click in front of a parentheses and see where the starting bracket was so that you can see the scope of the work that you're doing.
Very cool. So our last thing that we wanted to demo, I think, is tag sequencing, right?
Yep. So let's say that instead of showing a cute alert to people, let's say I was actually loading well, in this example, I'm actually loading like a Google Consumer Surveys, snippet, which is going to run on my site. But I might be loading a snippet like, say, jQuery, right? So if we pretend, for example, that that's what I'm loading, what I can do is I can, load this script, this jQuery, like say, load an external library. Once I know that the library is loaded correctly, what I can do is there's a call that you can add in your custom HTML tag. And I'm not going to remember the exact syntax right now, but basically there's a special way to tell Tag Manager inside your your tag that everything's loaded successfully, right? So you can say, you know, this went fine. There's another callback, an on failure handler that'll let you say, actually, you know, this broke somewhere along the line.
Right.
But imagining that, you know, I've successfully used the right on success handler, and you'll want to go to the docs rather than trust me on how to do this. Imagining that I've done that. Say this is a load library tag now. And so I'm actually, in this case, I'm not going to add any triggers to it, right? I don't need to load a library just by itself. That just kind of wouldn't make any sense. I'm just going to create the tag. It's going to tell me, okay, that tag's not going to fire, if that's what you want to do. And now I'm going to create another custom HTML tag. Let's say, you know, look for form values. So let's say I need to actually use that library, right, that I want to load in a custom HTML tag. I've got some JavaScript, say, that depends on jQuery, right? And so let's say, so go to my nice code mirror view. I'm going to say, and you know, in this case, it's yeah, going to be something like, yeah, alert, and you know, use a jQuery selector, right, to like get a particular value, right? And it's doing the nice indenting for me. So how do I know that jQuery is actually loaded, right? I could load it inside this tag, but if I've got 5 different tags that all need jQuery, there's going to be either unnecessary duplication, or I'm going to need to add some code that checks, is it already loaded? Is it not? Say, you know, this is a tag that I only want to fire on certain pages on my site. Let's say on the e-commerce page. Now, what I can do to make sure that jQuery actually loads successfully is I can, under advanced settings, I can look for tag sequencing and say I need to fire a tag before this tag fires, right? And this tag is going to be this load library tag. And I'm going to say, actually, you know, if that tag fails, don't fire this tag, right? And that'll make sure that you know, the library tag loads before this tag fires, right? If the library tag is already loaded, it's going to be smart enough not to load that again. One thing I should do, because the library is going to be loaded for the entire kind of life cycle of the page. So I should go to that library tag. And say, actually, I only need to fire this tag once per page, right? So now I can basically add this as a setup tag under tag sequencing to every tag that needs that library. And I can make sure, and that'll make sure that, you know, the tag fires once and exactly once per page, and every tag that needs it has it available. So
great.
More advanced example, but really useful if you need it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that was really great. And I think that we've given our users a good idea of some of the new features that we've released recently and some even pretty advanced use cases. I think now would be awesome if we can go ahead and go over to Caitlin Marvin, who is a data analyst from Progressive, joining us today remotely. because she's been doing some really cool things with GTM for mobile apps over the past 2 years. And I think, Caitlin, let's go ahead and turn it over to you because we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, hi everyone. So as Krista nicely introduced me, I'm Caitlin Marvin. I work for Progressive Insurance. I currently own Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and Google BigQuery for the entire enterprise. So we have it in 16 customer-facing applications, and we've been using Google Tag Manager for web since early 2013, and we've been using Google Tag Manager for mobile apps since late 2013. It's actually funny, I remember sitting at the GA Summit in 2013 and learning about GTM for mobile apps as we were vetting vendors for our mobile apps analytics. And I remember texting the team back at our campus saying, hey, we have to look at this. So we moved pretty quickly on GTM for mobile. So GTM for us is kind of a no-brainer at Progressive. It's a best practice. We haven't had a single implementation go without GTM. It's just really important to us. It provides a really great safety net. It's really flexible. You know, if we have to make adjustments after the fact, it really allows us to do it. It's definitely pretty easy to use, and it's definitely saved us a lot of money over the long runs. You know, not having to fix analytics defects, you know, being able to make adjustments if we have mistakes, as well as some pretty cool use cases that I'm about to go through in our mobile app space. So, perfect. So this is actually one of my favorite enhancements that we've done through GTM recently. So we're a pretty large organization. We have a lot of back-end services that support our customer-facing applications. So we occasionally have to take down these back-end services. And in the past, we never actually told our native application, our mobile application customers that we were in a maintenance window. So we would get feedback that customers couldn't understand why they couldn't log in you know, in the middle of the night when we had taken down the service to make the change. So we decided to try using Google Tag Manager to deploy alerts to our customers. So one of the issues with mobile app customers is we have to do an app store push in order to give them new information. And sometimes our maintenance alerts will happen, you know, on short notice, or they'll change and we may not need it, or we may need it. So we wanted something that was flexible and that we could kind of configure on the fly. So we ended up using a function tag in Google Tag Manager for mobile, and we actually can trigger this alert for a lot of different reasons with a lot of different variables. So currently, this is kind of the message that we've been using for our maintenance alert. So it says, we're sorry, the Progressive app is currently undergoing scheduled maintenance. During this time, some features may not be available. And I just took a really quick snippet from our tag. You can see that we use key value pairs to pass in the title as well as pass in the message. So we could actually call this alert at any point in our app using our current implementation. So this is definitely one of my favorites. I love letting customers know that, you know, we're currently in a maintenance window versus just having them get a generic service failure that says, sorry, try again later. I think this gives a lot more context to the customer. And what's amazing about this is I can just configure this, you know, the Friday before a Sunday night maintenance window, publish it and walk out of the office and know that it's in good hands. So this is a really fun one, and that's working out really well for us. So then another great example is, so we're using these maintenance alerts, you know, to talk to our customer. So at Progressive, it's a best practice to always do code reviews for something that's a customer-facing experience. So we've been using folders recently to kind of organize everything that's going in a release. So we'll create the new binary before we push to the App Store. And before I made these folders, I would have the domain architect and the technical application owner standing at my desk, and I would be, you know, trying to scan through all of our tags and triggers and variables and be like, okay, wait, no, this one's going in this release. Let me show it to you so you know that we're in good shape. So I started using folders because I could basically put everything that the, you know, TAO or technical application owner or domain architect needed to review. So I can just quickly open it up in the folder. We can click through all of those, and they know everything that's going. And it made the review process go a lot quicker. It also kind of removed the burden of me having to quickly scroll through all of the UI or trying to search and remember what was in those releases. It also kind of makes great documentation. So I can go back and say, hey, what went in our 3.7 release, or what went in our 3.8 release? So it's been working out really nicely for us. I really like the folders for that reason. So like I said, we have all these things that are facing the customer. So it's really important for us to make sure we test that these are behaving as we would expect them to. So a tester or QA would need to verify, the maintenance alert was firing as they expected, or another alert that we were triggering was happening when we expected it to. So the shared preview links have been phenomenal for us. The developers don't really love when I have maintenance alerts going on for days and days, and they're like, can we make the alert stop? I'm trying to work on something else. But one person's trying to verify it. So with the preview links, I can just distribute this to the tester and say, here's the preview link to load the binary that will load a maintenance alert. And here is a different preview link that will not have the maintenance alert fire. And then that way the tester can basically control the GTM container experience they're getting while not impacting the rest of the platform. So it works really nicely on both iOS and Android, and we've had great success. And everyone's appreciative when they don't have to get alerts that they don't necessarily need. So this is actually one of my favorite analytical wins that we've probably had in the last few months. So kind of to set the stage, one day I was trying to log into our application in a test environment, and I was sure I knew my credentials. So I kept trying to log in, and after there's another issue going on, so I wasn't actually able to successfully log in. But I noticed that this alert was happening saying, hey, your account's locked out. You've attempted to log in with bad credentials 5 times. You've been locked out. Please restart the application to try again. And I thought to myself, I don't think my mom would actually know what this alert means. I could see her maybe putting the app in the background and then bringing it back forward and expecting it to be considered restarting. So luckily, we have this event tagged in Google Analytics, so we have the data around this experience. So I went into the Google Analytics user interface, and I made a custom funnel that said, hey, tell me how many customers are receiving this alert, and how many of them are attempting again later after restarting their application, and how many of them are actually successful. So when we looked at the data, it was not a very good success rate. If the customer received this alert, they most likely were not going to be coming back to try again. So I pulled some other data from a few other sources and made a proposal to our business leader saying, hey, I think we should change this experience. I'm not sure our customers understand what we're asking them to do. And the whole purpose of the lockout was from a security perspective, and it wasn't necessary because we had other, security measures in place. So what we ended up doing was removing this alert, and now if a customer logs in 5 times with the wrong credentials, we'll actually take them out to our forgot your password flow, have them complete that process, and then we'll actually redirect them back to the mobile app, and we'll pre-fill their user ID, and then all they have to do is enter their password and log in. And so from that experience change, really using our Google Analytics data to identify it, we've seen a 30% increase in login successes. So it's a really big win. We're spending lots of time trying to make the best app possible, and so we want to make sure the customers can log in and get there. So between Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, we're getting a lot of great data. So here's kind of another great kind of creative way we've used Google Tag Manager. So when we first started off with Google Analytics for mobile apps, we are big users of BigQuery, using the data from GA that's moved over. And there was a period of time where the app data wasn't being ported over to BigQuery into the schema for us. So one of the things that we were able to do, since we use Google Tag Manager for mobile, was we could go in and actually put some of that app data into custom dimensions, immediately publish a new container. So we were actually getting the app data over into our BigQuery environment while Google was working on updating the schema. So it's not necessary anymore. I put a screenshot of what's in BigQuery right now for apps, which is very robust. But before, GTM kind of gave us that option to make a quick change. Whereas if we hadn't been using Google Tag Manager, we would have had to go back and have a developer, make adjustments to basically send that custom dimension for us. For example, like screen name. So it worked out really nicely to be able to make that adjustment and go.
That was really awesome, Caitlin. Thank you so much for all of those really cool different use cases and, personal stories that you had there. I think that those are really robust and should give people a better idea of how to use some of these features. I love that you organize all of your releases into folders and that you found really creative ways to alert your customers to things using GTM. I think that's really great.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So just a few reminders before we then jump into Q&A. And again, submit your questions. We're here to take them. You can ask questions of us, of Caitlin. We're here to answer your questions. So we've been talking all this time about Google Tag Manager, and I can't not mention our Analytics Academy course. So earlier this year, June and July of this year, we released our Google Tag Manager course via the Analytics Academy. It's a series of videos and course materials to really teach you kind of the fundamentals for getting started with Google Tag Manager. I think it's a pretty good course. We had 102,000 people take it already. So if you haven't taken it, I'd recommend it. And then finally, as always, some of our resources. So Help Center, support.google.com/analytics or /Google Tag Manager or Tag Manager. Analytics Academy, so analyticsacademy.withgoogle.com/GTM is where you'll find that course. And then finally, our GA Premium Google Plus community, which you guys all should be aware of because you are logged in through that community right now. It's a great place to have conversations, ask questions. We're happy to follow up on any questions from this HOA in the community. We'll be very responsive there. And you can always reach out to us on Twitter at Google Analytics. I'm at Krista Seiden. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to Q&A. All right, guys, I've got a pretty long list of questions here.
Great.
Okay, so Fabio wants to know, what are the main differences between the old version and the new version of GTM?
So I guess the main difference, apart from the UI just getting a new skin, being a little bit prettier, the main difference is the way that we handle triggers, which we used to call rules, right? And it turns out that they actually work the same way that they always did, but we're making that more obvious. So basically, the way GTM works is when an event happens, right? A page gets loaded, somebody clicks on something, then it goes through all of its rules and decides what to do and what tags to fire. That wasn't really obvious with the previous version of GTM because you could create a tag and just attach a rule to it that said something like, form value, equals, registered, right? And so you'd wonder why your tag wasn't firing. Well, your tag wasn't firing because that form value didn't actually exist until, say, the DOM was ready. And what GTM was doing was every time you created a tag and you didn't specify an event, it assumed you just wanted to run as soon as possible, right? So it would just evaluate all those rules as soon as GTM loaded. With the new GTM, when you create a trigger, the first thing that you have to do up front is you have to tell GTM, what event actually makes this happen, right? So in the example I just gave, right, I would have to at least, let's say, check form value. And I would have to pick a page view, and then I would be able to say, oh, actually, this form value isn't going to be available until the DOM is ready, right? So let's, make it that kind of trigger. And now I can say, form value X equals Y, right? So that's the main difference, is that we're just making it really obvious to you that, we evaluate these triggers when there's an event that happens. Right. And then as part of that, we actually simplified the way that auto event tracking works. So it used to be that if you wanted to track form submits, what you would do is you would fire a tag in GTM that would start listening for form submits, and that would have its own rules. And then you would, fire whatever tag you want to fire, maybe a GA tracking tag when that form gets submitted, and make sure that that's listening for a certain event name, et cetera, et cetera. We managed to cut the number of steps to do that in half, right? Now, all you need to do is create a tag, your GA tracking tag, and say, I want to fire this GA tracking tag when there's a form that gets submitted. Right. And so that was just like a nice kind of side benefit of this new scheme, is that it made it easier for us to do these kind of more advanced tracking scenarios.
Awesome.
It's worth noting, though, that any of the setup you had from a previous container that might have been migrated to the new interface will still work. So if you set up click triggers or click tracking or form tracking in our previous interface, you shouldn't necessarily need to change those to ensure that they're working, although you might want to, just for the ease of use down the road.
Yep. And one other thing I want to mention while we're here, and actually if we can shift to my demo machine here, some people are a little bit confused about when they're setting up like a form submit trigger. They get to kind of specify two sets of conditions, right? And one is like enable when, and one is fire on, right? And we're going to try to make that a little bit more intuitive, but just to explain what that means, you want to make sure that you're only kind of listening for form submits, where you expect it to happen. You don't want to have GTM listening for form submits on every single form on every page of your site, right? And the reason is, when you're doing stuff like, wait for tags or check validation, GTM is kind of, doing some magic to kind of insert itself right into that form submit to make sure that your tags fire before the form submits, to make sure that, the form validates, all that sort of thing. And you want to test that, right? And you don't want to have to test every single form and every single page of your site. So you want to say, actually, I'm only going to listen for form submits on, pages that, contain product purchase in the URL. And so that just limits kind of, okay, now I know, which form submits GTM is listening for, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And now I get to choose kind of which form submits I care about, based on something like the form ID.
Great. So we have a long list of questions. So in the interest of time, let's kind of try to get to these a little quicker.
Go.
So I have one here from Rick, and Rick asks, how do you use Google Tag Manager to track video events? Can you pass additional custom dimensions around video events? I'm going to take this one. And I'm going to say we actually did a Hangout on Air a little while back with Nico Maselli and myself. We had a summit presentation using player APIs. Yeah. It's a great way to expand what you're doing with video events. So check out that HOA, and there's some really good tips in there. Okay, so the next one is from Vicky. Are there any further developments for GTM for mobile apps, such as lookup table macros or GTM debugger for mobile apps?
Unfortunately, all we can say here is stay tuned. We definitely are not done with GTM for mobile apps.
Awesome. All right. So how about GTM for apps now? So this comes from Gustavo. Now it doesn't have the option to create one GTM container for iOS and Android. It's only for one of them, not both. Is that true?
Yeah. So the reason that we're doing that is iOS and Android SDKs, the ones that GTM provides, they have a different set of capabilities just because the two platforms are different. And those going to basically kind of keep diverging, right? As we add more features, iOS and Android are going to start to look more and more different inside of GTM. So what we did is, we make you choose which type of platform you're targeting with a particular container. Because the chance of confusion of trying to do Android and iOS stuff in the same container was just too great. And as an example, like the app version or the app name variable type in GTM, it's going to give you different results on different platforms, right? So rather than make you figure all of that out every time, we just kind of separate it out cleanly.
Great. From Jean-Francois. Practice my French. Is it just me, or when you type var name, the color syntaxing is broken?
It's definitely something we can look into and make sure that it's not. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Great. From Mark, right now it's often quite awkward to remember the name of a variable when editing custom HTML. It would be great to see auto completion for variable names when typing. Is this a feature on the roadmap?
I don't imagine we're going to roll it out in the next few months, but I can definitely see why that would, make this less error prone. We'd love to do that.
Cool. All right, from Jakob, will it be possible to create a very custom template tag for certain containers? I want to be able to customize GTM for an end customer without using custom HTML tags.
To create kind of a custom template?
Right, for their own container.
There are some engineering roadblocks to do that. We can see why that would be super useful.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed on that, basically.
Awesome. From Gregory, tag sequencing. Does this mean we can fire a first tag via the tag sequencing, even if it doesn't have its own trigger?
Yes. Yeah. If it's you can create a tag, not attach any triggers to it, but if it's attached as a setup tag to another tag, it'll still fire.
Right. Also good to know if you're looking and you're debugging a container and you have a tag and you're trying to figure out why it's firing and it doesn't have any triggers on it, make sure that it's not being used in tag sequencing under advanced settings.
Yeah, and the debug tool, we're gonna make sure that kind of shows that, so you understand why it's firing.
All right, from Analytics Max Lead. Hi, just looking at the folders per release example, can you predict that the same tag changing in 2 releases will only be visible in the last folder? So any plans on adding a Gmail label type feature?
Yeah, we can see why labels would be useful. We added folders first because we have some kind of additional plans for how those are going to work. But labels, those would definitely be useful as well.
Cool. All right, from Gustavo, I would love to understand the share preview link for apps. Maybe this is a question for Caitlin. The name of the app is which, namespace, and what's the difference between generate begin preview link and end preview link? Or maybe that's a question for one of you guys.
Oh, so I think the name spacing, okay, so the app name is used so that when you actually click that link on the mobile device, it'll open up the right app. And there are 2 links there to begin and end preview, because you need one link to actually enter the app in preview mode, and then another link to say, actually, I don't want to be in preview mode anymore, right? So the next time I open the app, please give me the production container.
Awesome. From Vincent, how does Google Tag Manager for mobile apps handle the offline mode?
So in offline mode, Google Tag Manager for mobile apps it always keeps a container cached locally, right? So it's just going to use whatever the most recent version of the container was. It will batch up, when you're sending out hits, it'll batch those up and send them out the next time that it has a network connection. There's some limit on that. I don't know what it is.
Okay, great. All right, is there any fast way to recreate container contents without access to it via observing download gtm.js ID equals container underscore ID and exporting to it to a standard JSON format? That might be a little specific.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. We don't have a way to kind of take a GTM container and turn it into the exported JSON version.
Okay, from Svan, can you please show how you send alerts as an event? Do we need an extra implementation? So is this and maybe a question related to Caitlin's example?
Send alerts as an event. Are you? Yeah, if this is related to Caitlin's example, I think the way that they implemented that is they actually had, the developer of the app implemented a function that shows an alert. And then there's a way to basically, if you look at our developer documentation, there's a way to register that function, with Tag Manager so that it can use it. And then GTM for mobile apps has a tag type called custom function, right? So Caitlin has her container set up to call that function using a tag and pass it what message she wants to be shown.
Cool. Another question from Rick. How do you use Google Tag Manager to implement GA e-commerce on-site ad tracking?
Yeah, so this is very similar to the other enhanced e-commerce implementations that you might want to do. And essentially, you need to ensure that the right information to measure that ad impression, as an example, is in the data layer prior to whatever event, for example, if it's a page view that's firing to track that activity. So we do have some really good documentation around this, also in our developer documentation, and we keep referencing that. We should probably ensure that there's a link somewhere to our developer docs, so you can take a look through that, and both for the web side of things and the mobile side of things, find answers to these types of questions.
That's just developers.google.com/tag manager?
Right. I think it's tag-manager.
Tag-manager.
Maybe not. I don't know.
I don't think there's a dash there, but
Okay, probably not.
Okay, from Petrie. Some A/B or multivariate testing tools require code in the header and in the end of the page. Any idea when this would be possible with GTM?
Yeah, I guess I'm not going to be able to answer that right now. Sort of, there are ways to do that. It sort of depends on what the testing tool expects, like whether it uses document.write. You can do it, but it is a little bit of a pain today.
All right, I've got one more question. It's a little bit specific, but let's see if we can get through this. Does Google plan to offer GA's ISP organization, aka hostname, as a default variable in GTM? Alternatively, is there any way to capture and classify this dimension, say via a lookup table within GTM via other methods? And that's from Jeff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of functionality that you get out of Google Analytics. ISP is one of them that requires some server-side determination. This is definitely something that we understand the value of and that we're thinking about. Today, if you did have your own JavaScript to do that, you could certainly include that in, for example, a custom JavaScript variable and try to determine that based on your own logic. But it will really depend on what that classification is. And for something like ISP, of course, you probably want to rely on Google Analytics information anyway. So stay tuned, something that we're thinking about.
Awesome. So I think we made it through just about all of those questions. Good job, guys. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you for the great questions. It was a really good conversation I think we had. And a really special thanks to Caitlin for joining us and sharing her awesome use cases. So stay tuned for the next HOA, and we'll see you guys back in a few weeks. Bye-bye.